What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here in our podcast. What's going on in pop culture right now? This week we have 2 TV shows and 3 albums to get into. On the TV front, the return of Daredevil Born Again for Season 2 on Disney+, and the return of Apples for All Mankind for Season 5. Very exciting. And on the music front, new EP from Central Cee, new album from Robyn, her first in 7.5 years, and the 4th album from pop star Charlie Puth. A lot to get into here. Make sure you subscribe. YouTube.com/nostalgiapod, Linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See the links below. Leave a comment. Let me know it's good, and let's get into it. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Central Cee's 5th EP, All Roads Lead Home. This is Centra's first project since that debut full-length album Can't Rush Greatness came out at the beginning of last year. And I was a big fan of Can't Rush Greatness. That was my number 4 album of 2025. To me, that was Centr really delivering on the promise that he's exhibited ever since he really blew up as the face of UK drill in the 2020s. And it's funny to reflect on that project being technically his first proper studio album, because Central Cee has given us a lot of, singles that had their own lives, such as Doja, various EPs, such as Split Decision with Dave, of course, Sprinter becoming a massive hit. He's been able to create moments without necessarily dedicating full-length projects to them, and now he's back. Central Cee's 5th EP, All Roads Lead Home, is certainly more of Central Cee doing what he does best. If you're a fan of his, you will likely enjoy most of these tracks. That being said, there's nothing inherently new on this, nothing he hasn't done before, or frankly hasn't done better before. And this is curious to me because Central Cee is clearly the most established UK rapper ever in American pop music, and you contrast that with how quickly rap is moving back in the UK right now, with the rapid rise of SD Kid, Finesse Kid, Fake Mink, etc. Drill is not at the forefront right now, and I'll be very curious how well Central Cee is able to establish himself, clearly doubling down on the sound he's already well established doing. And of course, given that this is an EP, there's only a handful of songs here. The first one, of course, is Iceman Freestyle, which came out sometime last year. This was, released in tandem regarding Drake and his forthcoming Iceman album, forthcoming. So we've been told. Who knows if that album actually does come out in the end? But some kind of live stream this came to be, and I think for what it is, it's pretty solid. I think the bass hits pretty hard. I like the way Centra's flow kind of goes up and then goes down. He kind of plays with the pace there. He does kind of reuse some bars that we've heard him do before, which makes sense for a freestyle and like a genuine kind of off the dome style freestyle. But like him saying the petitest waist, like it's such a specific turn of phrase that we've heard from him before. And in general, like this whole album, it's the straightforward style of Central Cee flexing that we've come to know. He was pretty reflective and introspective on the album last year, but there's not really enough room on this EP for him to really get into anything else besides just his general, attitude and bravado and all that. Slaughter featuring J Hus is definitely the most intriguing thing here sonically. Of course, J Hus, I believe it's their first collab together, but J Hus at one time was the most exciting new face in UK rap as well, kind of blowing up just a few years before Centr really came up. I think what Centr was 2020, early 2021 was that first mixtape, and J Hus was kind of right before COVID, so just a little bit ahead of him. But of course, J Hus has a lot more of that, the Afro swing, that those Afro rhythms in his music, in his style of UK rap. So having Central Cee kind of play into that, I think opens up new possibilities. I think the song is kind of cool because you still have those eerie strings a la drill. I think the drop is pretty cool. And Central Cee, to his credit, I really like the energy he brings on this track. Very aggressive. It's a nice contrast with the more rhythmic style that Hus is giving you. Wagwan is fine. It's kind of a more understated hook and more of a nasally delivery from Central Cee. I like him when he's more energetic and fast-paced in his delivery and his flow. Feelings, I think this beat's a lot more impressive, very triumphant, and you get that energetic delivery again. This song would have sounded right at home on Can't Rush Greatness to me. I think that I know that feeling, like the refrain, I really like the way those bars work. DC-10, I think this is like the best pure drill beat here. Very eerie, very cool. The darkness to the bass is very enjoyable here. And then we have the last song, which is clearly my favorite. That's Wi-Fi Dat. Love the beat. I think this is so hard. The bass hits so hard, and Centr has a really nice loose flow that really plays into it. So yeah, for a low stakes Central Cee EP, and that's clearly what this is being presented as, pretty solid. it's just coming at a time where UK rap is really running in other directions right now. So I'm just curious where this will kind of stack up. And, I don't want to read too much into it because, again, it's just an EP, and I loved his album from last year. But I think there's definitely just some things to watch in terms of just the genre in general. So let me know, what did you think of this new EP from Central Cee? How do you feel about UK rap these days? Let me know. And for more music reviews, more rap reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up, Wallback Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Robyn's 9th album, Sexistential. This is Robyn's first album since Honey came out back at the end of 2018, almost 7.5 years between albums. And of course, Robyn, one of the legendary pop figures out of Sweden, whenever she releases something, it is of course notable. What's most welcome about Robyn's 9th album, Sexistential, is that this is clearly a return to the sound of her album Body Talk and less like her most recent album, Honey. Linking up with her longtime producing collaborator Claes Alund, this is very much pure Swedish synth pop. It's everything you really expect from the most well-known Robyn music. And on top of that familiar production, this is also really interesting and engaging lyrical message, because Robyn, now in her mid-40s, is singing about becoming a single mother in her early 40s and going through IVF and having some pretty amusing ways to talk about that journey. To me, the clear highlight of the album is clearly the title track, Sexistential. These lyrics are so amusing, joking about wanting Adam Driver to be her sperm donor. This is quirky, but it's still a bop. I love those glitchy vocals. It's without a question the highlight here. But sonically, the entire album sounds really good. And if there's anything to really criticize with it, is that it's pretty brief. It's pretty short. It's only around 30 minutes long, but there's a lot packed in there that's cool to listen to. And this is music that still sounds relevant today, because Robyn is a pioneer for the now much more in vogue and common alternative pop scene that we know with many famous faces today. It was really cool, for example, to hear Charlie XCX last year pay that forward with the Brat remix album and Robyn's feature on 360. Looking at some of the other tracks here, Really Real, the first song, that pulsing bass, like pure trance beat, honestly, right away really grabs you. And then with the chorus, I think has a really nice vocal melody, kind of dusting you with some kind of twinkly fairy dust on that beat. I think the bass part itself, the trance part itself, kind of reminded me of like Gesaffelstein or something right away, but pretty cool. And I think Robyn, there's a soothingness to the way she sings that meshes very nicely with these, quite engaging layered production styles. Dopamine, the use of these like robotic vocals, I think is pretty cool. This was the lead single from back in November. Blow My Mind. There's actually a rework version of a song of hers from 2002, which I was not aware of going in. Really noticeable reverb with some auto-tune vocals on Robyn and more of those robotic vocals as well. Just the kind of the whole gamut of vocal effects here is pretty interesting. And nice bass drum. I think the hook's pretty good. Sucker for Love. This is a song she had previously recorded back in 2014 or so. Snares are great. There's synths everywhere. Another really solid hook. It Doesn't Mean a Thing. Robyn talking about, kind of being horny and going on one night stands and being really content with that. I think it's lyrically pretty interesting and engaging with that message there. Heavy auto-tune hook, but still very catchy and, again, pretty eclectic. I think Robyn is letting loose on this album, not afraid to, let that freak flag fly and just be honest about what she's going through and how she's feeling about things. And I appreciate that, authenticity, that openness. Talk to Me, very lively bass tempo. I think the vocals here are very energetic and has a really big chorus, probably the biggest chorus on the whole album. The only song I didn't really care for too much is Light Up. Really heavy effects here, but I think it's just a bit too messy. Doesn't quite come together for me, just a bit noisy. And then the last one, Into the Sun, bass drum, still sounds pretty good. So yeah, short but certainly sweet album. Obviously, when a pop star is in their 40s, it's hard to put like massive expectations on them from a creative output standpoint, and 7.5 years between albums, it's obviously quite long and all that. But Robyn was able to come back with clearly something that made sense for her to put into work, into a body of work. And I think that was really delivered on. And, will she double down on the sound of Body Talk moving forward production wise? But I'm inclined to say yes, just because that feels like her most natural mode, across most of her discography after all. And Dancing on My Own from that album has become just a massive track, massive cover song, etc. In the last 10 plus 15 years since it came out, right? That is increasingly becoming a big part of her legacy, but on the other hand, like, that album is so widely celebrated as a whole as well, so it makes sense for her to call back to it. Let me know, though, what did you think of Robyn's 9th album, Sexistential? What did you think of it? And for more music reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Charlie Puth's 4th album, Whatever's Clever. 3.5 years since Charlie Puth's previous album came out in the fall of 2022. Charlie is back after delaying this album a little bit to get away from the Harry Styles release date that he previously set for this album. I've long admired and been a fan of Charlie Puth's abilities as a pop songwriter, as a musical composer, just as a creator of music, and someone with perfect pitch and understanding of melodic math and all those producing, facets. He's really had a handle on that his whole career. And I was such a big fan of his second album, Voice Notes, which is now several years old, from back in 2018 after all, that I was really hoping to hear more of that on the last album. And he really went in a different direction with that. And I found most of those songs just frankly uninteresting compared to the boppy success of that second album. And I think he did a pretty good job actually in promoting this album, doing a really inspired take of the national anthem at the Super Bowl this year. And that first single, Changes, I think did just enough to grab some attention. Charlie Puth's 4th album, Whatever's Clever, is surprising because this is Charlie Puth clearly leaning into his dadcore era as a brand new dad. Charlie Puth and his co-producer Blood Pop have gone full 80s with this album. The use of synth, the sonic direction, there's a clear frame of reference in mind here. We're talking Phil Collins. We're talking yacht rock. And we're talking yacht rock to such a degree that Michael McDonald and Kenny Loggins are actually featured on one of the songs here. While I still long for Charlie's music when it had more of a bite, more of an attitude to it, a la what he did with Voice Notes, there are more interesting songs here than there were on the previous album. More than anything, I find Whatever's Clever a sign of Charlie Puth's continued growth and maturity as an artist. He's talented enough as a pop music creator to really make whatever kind of music he wants to make. Clearly, he sounds and comes across as someone inspired to do exactly what he did on this album. The last thing we want from someone so obviously talented is to come across as aimless like they did on the previous album. So the fact that there's a clear point of view, Whatever's Clever, does give me some solace, even if it's still not exactly the Charlie Puth mode I like the most. That first song, Changes, that lead single, I do think it's pretty strong. I like the synths. I think the chorus is very catchy. I like the layered vocals from Charlie on it. Had that piano solo moment. You have some nice drum tempo. Charlie giving you the bridge in a lower key. I quite enjoy it. I think the background choir on the final iteration of the chorus also sounds really nice. Beat Yourself Up, more horns, definitely a funkier song, funkier sound with this one. I think the vocals come across as pretty natural from Charlie, honestly, not really much effects to it there. The chorus is fine here. I do find Charlie's delivery on the verses to actually be a little bit more compelling than the chorus itself. And there are some more auto-tune touches towards the end of the track as well. Cry, you have a Kenny G feature here, which is, I suppose, pretty inspired. It makes sense in the context of the full album here. Of course, Kenny G previously featured on Kanye's Jesus is King several years ago, right? He's popped up with other pop music here and there. And of course, he has a noticeable, solo moment here with those horns. Washed Up, I think sonically this reminded me of Spice Girls' Stop in the beginning there. Definitely a better chorus. I think the song's pretty cool. Production through these first 4 tracks, so it's very similar, very, very, very even keel to this point. I think the drums, though, pretty tight. I like that bass line. I do think the outro of the background vocals kind of take you out in a solid way as well. Again, like, these are all pretty good songs. I think Changes is the closest he gets to something like truly like energetic and can hold a candle to like those past bops. But like, he clearly isn't trying to make something as overtly poppy this time around. New Jersey, featuring Raven Lene, I really like this one. I think those synths are really eclectic. The same drums we've been hearing the whole album thus far. Hook is great though. Total strays for New Jersey on the surface, but of course Charlie Puth bemoaning New Jersey as someone who's from and grew up in New Jersey. So I guess it is his right to talk about his birthplace as he wishes. And Raven Lene does fit in pretty well on the song. Don't Meet Your Heroes. I think this is the first break, the first sonic shift with the record here. The drums though still grooving. It's a more vocally forward song for sure, with Charlie giving you that natural delivery. I think quite lyrically strong. Kind of a clear message in POV with what he's singing about. And there's another nice piano flourish again. Home is a unexpectedly massive highlight featuring Hikaru Utada, who is one of the biggest and best-selling artists in the history of Japanese music. The synths are completely back here, and the vocal delivery is very strong, very rich from Charlie here. The hook very vibey, and then once Hikaru comes in, you have a really beautiful duet between Charlie and Hikaru Utada here. I think their vocal back and forth is really awesome, and it's not just a tacked on feature. It really comes together in I think a really impressive way. And again, talk about an inspired feature, right? Charlie Puth with his clout, with his label support on Atlantic, right? He could get most any feature he wants, right? And that's who he wanted to get. Again, it speaks to what he was going for and having clear intention with the album. Hey Brothers stands out because of it being a more stronger acoustic guitar presence, really for the first time on the album. Pretty solid. Sideways though, featuring Coco Jones, a little bit more bass. I think the song's really cool. I think Coco frankly steals the song from Charlie. Just her vocals. There's just a little bit more power to them, unsurprisingly. The depth of her voice, I think, fits in really well on the drums and the bass with this song. So really cool once again. Love in Exile. This is the yacht rock song featuring Michael McDonald, featuring Kenny Loggins. I mean, cool to hear from them in 2026, I suppose. Not really yacht rock guys, so it's not necessarily what I'm aiming for, but this was, again, clearly something Charlie Puth wanted to do. And I have a lot more grace for that song, and clearly being a homage, a pastiche of a certain genre that Charlie clearly likes and was inspired by in general in terms of the overall 80s influence on this album. I have a lot more time for that than I do for Until It Happens to You, which features a frankly really grating feature from Jeff Goldblum. It just feels really tacked on and distracting, frankly, because it's one of those spoken word / sing-songy things from Jeff Goldblum, not too dissimilar from what he did with Wicked recently. And it's just strange. It just kind of gets in the way, and I think production-wise, there's some interesting moments with that song in terms of the layered layered vocals and the upbeat drums, and some background choir as well. But the Jeff Goldblum stuff just sounds really out of place and unnecessary. And then lastly, you have I Used to Be Cringe, which, this is a slower song, a piano track. I think it's frankly a somewhat impressive display of self-awareness from Charlie Puth, because it's very reflective on his past old career ambitions and what he did to achieve those things. And, I think sonically there's some cool harmonization on the choir and some echo effects and things like that. But just Charlie kind of nodding at, things he did with the first record, 9-Track Mind, that just come across as really dated and out of place, right? And he even doesn't seem to have nearly as much time for what he did during COVID, right? Where I thought he was very impressively on TikTok and displaying his creative process and his musical, composition abilities and things like that. Even that he seems to look back on not super fondly. And we're clearly just at a different place in Charlie Puth's personal life, where again, he is a new dad, he's married, and he seemingly has less drive to play the pop game and get as big as possible. And cool to hear that from him. It's weird for me to sit with that, because I look back very fondly on the best stuff he did when he was doing that. Again, I look back to voice notes, Done For Me, How Long, Attention, LA Girls. Those are some of the best pop bangers of the late 2010s. I wish he wanted to make more of those. He clearly doesn't. So that's where I'm at with it. But let me know, what did you think of Charlie Puth's fourth album, Whatever's Clever? What do you think of this latest direction from the pop songwriter and singer? Let me know. And for more music reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Daredevil Born Again Season 2. While technically the 5th season overall of this iteration of Daredevil played by Charlie Cox, originated on Netflix, we're now in the second go-around with the MCU and Marvel Studios really in control of the storytelling here. And what's kind of notable about Daredevil Born Again is that this has become an annualized show, with Season 3 actually in production right now and scheduled for a year from now. Perhaps Daredevil Born Again is made at the right price point, hard to say, given the extreme unevenness of the quality. It is curious that Daredevil is seeming to persist and live on. Daredevil Born Again went through a lot of creative mishaps and creative differences, and that really bore out in Season 1, which started off in a really so-so place before starting to iron out the kinks by the end of that season. Daredevil Born Again Season 2 is a lot more consistent than Season 1 because there's just a clear narrative focus going on. Vincent D'Onofrio's Wilson Fisk is full-on kingpin at this point as the mayor of New York, imposing martial law, being the bad guy. And Matt Murdock, Daredevil, is on the run, being actively pursued. There is a lot of plot momentum here going on. And while it might be tough to lose the legal drama aspect of the Matt Murdock character, there is something to be said for Born Again just getting on with it and ripping into a lot of narrative action plot. The show has also put the time in to develop this world of Daredevil's New York to the point that we're not asking for larger MCU connection. Season 2 is definitely another step in the right direction, and it's pretty cool that this show has become an annualized production. That being said, I do think there's some, problems with the show here and there. Margarita Leviva's character of Heather is back for Season 2, and that's a character that just has never really worked. I've been a big fan of Leviva whenever I've seen her. I thought she was really good on Task last year. Of course, loved her on HBO's The Deuce a few years back. But the Heather character just never really made much sense. It was one of the biggest weak points of Season 1. Just her relationship with Matt never really worked. Knowledge of Matt's identity didn't help, but just she was in a lot of the weakest scenes and weakest plot points. And now there's kind of a huge tonal shift with what's going on with her character, at least to start here, and I just don't find it too interesting. And her association with Fisk all of a sudden, I don't know, it is weak to say the least. What I do like though is I like seeing Matt Murdock and Karen both on the run and openly being enemies of Fisk and his regime, right? And of course, D'Onofrio's performance as Wilson Fisk has been a strong point. I have enjoyed that the entire time since he first debuted it on Netflix. And his ability to play his cards close to his vest but still be a master manipulator, I think, really lends itself well to just chasing your heroes down, right? And seeing the vigilante task force that he's assembled and just wrecking shop throughout New York with no consequences. There are certainly some real-world parallels you can draw with that, just like, D'Onofrio's performance as Kingpin can lend itself to some famous world leaders we might recognize as well. None of it necessarily seems too over the top. That being said, I actually really enjoyed the dueling propaganda media that we see on the show, where you have the Fisk created the testimonials on the street of New Yorkers saying how much they love New York and how great Fisk is doing and making the city safe and going after these wanton vigilantes and things like that. And it's just really funny to see those videos because they're so clearly inauthentic to a real life New Yorker experience. You would never expect to see something like that. And of course, we contrast that with BB Urick's, guerrilla, Guy Fawkes-esque, anonymous-esque, mocking videos exposing the corruption of the Fisk regime. And of course, we learned that it's BB behind it, which was not a big surprise. But I really like kind of the style behind that. It felt like there was just a bit more of like a punch and a POV to the world once you added those things in, which I quite enjoyed. Action-wise, the show remains as gritty as ever. I thought the boat assault was pretty cool. Action-wise, the show remains as gritty and grisly as ever. I think the boat assault in the first episode was done quite well. Just the hand-to-hand of it all, and the fact that Daredevil does not have an invincibility to him. He does lose fights. He does take damage in the fights he wins, right? He's been saved from time to time. Bullseye saving him early on in season 2 here. Bullseye still being at large, and now maybe a character that we don't necessarily understand where he's at. Interesting, right? It seems like the Bullseye character is going to be part of the ensemble moving forward because he was also noted as returning for season 3, right? Maybe Bullseye will be more in the mix. It feels like John Bernthal's Frank Castle, the Punisher, perhaps will be really leaving this orbit. Of course, we saw him in 2 episodes in Born Again season 2, and we know, of course, that following the conclusion of Daredevil Born Again season 2, May 12th will be the release of the Punisher One Last Kill, hour-long, special, Marvel special presentation, which they've done a few of. Would I be shocked if that's like the last we really ever see of Bernthal as the Punisher? Largely just because of his schedule, right? He's a really in-demand and exciting actor, and he probably doesn't want to keep doing the Punisher all the time. Do we see Matt Murdock? Do we see Frank Castle show up in Secret Wars? Maybe. I'm not really holding my breath on that, just because I do have a hard time kind of thinking about like how this world really connects to the MCU. I mean, we have the vision of New York City that we've come to know from the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. It's just very different from this Daredevil world, right? And I don't expect Spider-Man Brand New Day this summer to connect it in a greater way to what's been going on tonally on the Daredevil show. Yes, we saw Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock show up in the last Spider-Man movie, and that was more of a acknowledgement of Daredevil's return to the fold more than anything else. So I'm not sure if all that's going to totally mesh all the way. We'll see it in due time. Cool to have Tony Dalton taking a larger role as the swordsman this time around after debuting in Hawkeye a few years back. But yeah, I think Born Again season 2, the stakes have just accelerated. Like we just kind of got on with it with this show. And I think that just makes this show, frankly, more interesting. Because I think when it's moving at a brisker pace, I just don't know if there's enough tightness to the storytelling, right? And the MCU on Disney Plus has been very challenged of late to the point where it's basically doesn't exist anymore, right? We have the Vision Quest show coming out at the end of the year. That show's already been, completed filming. It's in post now. We know Born Again season 3 is in production right now. That's the only other live action Marvel show in production right now. Are we expecting a Vision Quest season 2? I think that would be very wishful thinking. And, Star Wars, apart from Ahsoka season 2, which again is also in the can coming later this year, Star Wars live action on Disney Plus is also seemingly going away as well, right? The Mandalorian concluding in movie form in just a few months here. So maybe Daredevil's like the last of a dying breed as the MCU and Disney, rightfully in my opinion, get back to prioritizing the big screen first. Time will tell again. Let me know where you at with Born Again season 2. I think it's broadly continuing the positive momentum of the end of season 1, and so far so good for me. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with the review of For All Mankind, Apple TV Plus's science fiction series flagship at this point. For All Mankind, one of the stalwart debut franchises for Apple TV when it first came into the content game. And against all odds, seemingly the show is back for season 5 and has also been renewed for a 6th and final season. For All Mankind's gotten to the point where we have a spin-off coming, Star City, about the Russian space program coming later this year. For All Mankind is as great as ever with season 5 because all the core appeals of this alt history science fiction series remain. As the seasons progress, we've jumped decades and decades into the future, now finding ourselves in 2012 as the residents of Mars are growing increasingly in conflict with everyone back home on Earth. And of course, the progression of all that sci-fi plot remains really entertaining for this show. It's one of the best long-running science fiction series at this point. But what sets apart For All Mankind is what it's done with its characters over the years. Given all the time jumps and the aging up of characters, the growing of the ensemble, the departure of characters over time, it's become a show about legacy, and the show has a certain brand of sentimentality, of niceness, idealism that really makes it quite pleasant, but also really rewarding journey as we get into the 5th season of the show. Seeing Joel Kinnaman now play an 80-year-old Ed Baldwin is quite amusing. The show has long ago become more than just the story of Ed's heroics. Kelly and Elena still carry a lot of plot here, but Toby Kebbell's Miles, only introduced last season, also feels increasingly significant to the storytelling. I still have a lot of time for All Mankind. I think it really rocks. Now, of course, setting our scene here with season 5, again, we've jumped about a decade or so after every season, and it brings you to 2012 or so, it seems. The show began in the 60s, right? The original pitch and appeal of For All Mankind, right? What if the space race never stopped because the Russians beat the Americans to the moon, right? And then this cascading all history has continued to bear tons of fruit and tons of entertainment. And some of those things are just Easter eggs, such as in the montage to open season 5 with John Lennon being alive and James Bragg, a character we've come to know, defeating Al Gore instead of George W. Bush, Hurricane Katrina being mild, John F. Kennedy Jr. in the news right now, on Hulu, of course, still alive in the world we have here, the Montreal Expos moving to Portland instead of Washington, D.C. All those are fun Easter eggs. That montage is always really enjoyable to sit with. But there's other been big things, right? Like the Soviet Union still being alive and well into the 21st century. Big aspect of, many characters and plot with the series, of course. But I think what's been impressive about where the show has taken itself, right? I mean, you think back to that big level up in season 2 with the moon base, getting a moon base in, was it the 80s, right? It was pretty impressive. Thinking about where that show was then, and now where it is with Happy Valley, with the settlement of Mars. And I like the groundwork that was laid with season 4 with this conflict between the people on Mars who want to have purpose and also want to have their own agency, doing the Goldilocks heist, stealing this mineral-rich asteroid and bringing it into Mars orbit versus the plan of sending it to Earth and decreasing the legitimacy and urgency of the Mars mission. And now we jump ahead further. Season 5 introduces us to the first generation of people that have grown up and, only know Mars life, growing up as children there. One of those, of course, is Kelly's son and Ed's grandson. And we're now seeing the seeds of this Mars independence movement that Ed is certainly involved with, Miles becoming more and more of a respected leader in. I think that's going to lend itself to just a lot of good plot. You still have Ed as the leader of Helios and his desires to make a self-sustaining Mars colony that doesn't rely on supplies coming from Earth. And of course, within this general orbit, of course, you have what Helios's mission is, with Kelly striking out in her scientific pursuits in this crater on Mars. We know that the show will eventually shift focus from doing that kind of thing to instead trying to mine the moon of Titan, the second largest moon in the solar system, orbiting Saturn, of course. And Margot, even though she's in prison, of course, for all of her turncoat, actions as a member of Rush Cosmos, effectively, despite her well-intentioned reasoning and all that, Margot's still around on the show in her older age as well to help Elena with science calculations from prison. Creative way to keep her on board, I have to say. They've also introduced that Ed has stage 3 cancer and his health effectively permits him from even flying. That's why he actually was convicted in absentia, for his actions in the Goldilocks heist last season. He wasn't able to make it back to Earth to be in prison for his deeds. Quite the legacy as a character, but I would not be shocked if the Ed character doesn't make it to the end of this season. I think they've done a really creative job of keeping Ed plausibly on the show, keeping Joel Kinnaman on the show despite his advancing age. I think we're gonna hit the end of the rope here, just like Margot, Daniel Poole, these characters we've been with for such a long time. I think we're starting to really move past them. We'll see how that goes, right? I think there's still plenty of time. We have a whole other season. Now, if they jump the final season into the 2020s, into our effective modern time, who really knows, right? Ed could be 90. Maybe he doesn't age nearly as fast on Mars, and they'll explain it that way. Who can say, right? I'm a bit curious about how Kelly's son, Ed's grandson, Alex, is going to play out, just because it's a lot of teen angst to start, and teen angst is traditionally pretty tough to watch on TV. We already saw a lot of that on this show with the Danny Stevens character, one of the least likable characters on the series. So I'm hoping we don't go down that road as well. Cool to see him rock the space bike, in that first episode before he uncovers this body, which was not in fact a suicide, actually some kind of murder. The murder, of course, was pinned on our North Korean friend we've spent a lot of time with. I don't think anyone actually believes that's actually the case here. So we'll see how all that goes. Aleda being the CEO of Helios is pretty cool. I think that's a character that has been one of the most rewarding journeys on the series, right? I think Coral Pena's done a great job. Don't know how convincing she is as playing someone a lot older than her. Like they give her like subtle gray hairs. They give Cynthia Wu's Kelly like subtle gray hairs and stuff, try and make them look a little bit older. But it's really just that. Like, they don't have like heavy prosthetics and old makeup on the way Joel Kinnaman does. So minor nitpick. And if you think about like where this show is at this point, I think it's kind of approached The Expanse, right? We've gone deeper into the sci-fi, right? And like deeper into the life of Mars and the advancements beyond actual reality with space and stuff, that it's approaching that kind of thing. But again, I think the tone that the show often takes and how it treats its ensemble and the passage of time is what sets this show apart, right? From a show like that, from a Battlestar or something, right? Yeah, let me know. What did you think of the start of For All Mankind Season 5? What are you looking forward to seeing with this season? What do you like about the show? And for more TV reviews, subscribe. I'll see you next time. All right, that's going to do it for the pod this week. Next week, high profile things to discuss. Of course, the Super Mario Galaxy movie, Mario 2, following up the massive hit that was the first Mario movie from Illumination a few years back. Also, the drama from A24 starring Zendaya and Robert Pattinson. Your Friends and Neighbors on Apple back for Season 2. Maul Shadow Lord, the newest Star Wars series on Disney Plus, animated, of course. New solo album from Sway Lee, one half of Ray Shremmer, the solo album everyone's always been waiting for. It's finally here. Some other stuff to get to as well. I'm seeing Twice in concert. I'll talk about that. Make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See the links below. Leave a comment. Let me know what's good, and I'll see you next week.